Dale's going to be giving the same presentation next month in Barcelona, Spain at the PMI Global Congress, and we're very lucky to have this unique opportunity to hear it first. Before we get started, I just want to point out to you that there's a chat window and that you can chat in your questions or comments, and when Dale has finished her presentation, we're going to have time for her to address our questions. But more importantly, Dale advised me that throughout the presentation she's going to ask us questions and enter your response in the chat area. Okay, so I'd like to turn it over now to Dale.
Thank you, Betsy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I love it when technology works. Well, I'm delighted to be here today. I'm so glad that Betsy reached out to me. She was an awesome student in the class, so high five to you there, Betsy. I am an exam preparation specialist, so you notice that I have a lot of certifications after my name. I have more letters after my name than are in my name at this point. So I do a lot of these different kinds of webinars because I've got to be able to get CDUs and PDUs, and so I go back and forth between the International Institute of Business Analysis as well as PMI. I've also done presentations at joint sessions having to do with PMI and IIBA, and then some of them sat on one side of the room and some of them sat on the other side of the room, but they all got together because we want to be able to learn more about what can we do. It's not in a box that we're doing things. We want to be able to understand what are the best tools and techniques that we could utilize. So tonight I'm going to be presenting to you about the 6 steps for planning and managing requirement problems before they happen. And these are actually 6 steps that come from the project management world, but were easily applied for business analysis. I'm going to give you the business analyst perspective of this. Now I'll give you a little bit of background information about how I came to this journey about project management, business analysis. I've done a lot of work in this area, and I had the unique opportunity to travel multiple times to Tunisia just prior to the January 2011 revolution. And my role was to teach project management to people from Tunisia so they could take an exam. They could take the PMP exam. And so there are about 100 people in Tunisia alone, and these are some of my students that were in my class here, as a result of me working in Tunisia. Now, if you've been working in any kind of country, you know that it's a little bit different than working in the United States, right? Different kinds of culture, different kinds of dress. These people here, they had to take the exam in English even though their first language was Arabic and French, and I don't speak Arabic or French, so we had to be able to work through that. So because this Tunisia is a small country, you may not know where it's at, so there's a map over here. I had to look on Google Map in order to find where it was located when I was first asked to go there. And it is an interesting country because it's a European type of flair, but also has some Arabic traits related to it. There's some little background noise. If anybody's doesn't have themselves on mute, make sure you put yourself on mute. Thank you. Okay, so what's important to be able to address here is how do you define success and how do you take care of problems in various different cultures, whether it's or in various different countries like Tunisia. Because Tunisia's revolution just started in a teeny tiny little town called Sidi Bou Said. I was there. It started with a 26-year-old produce vendor who refused to pay a petty bribe. And the municipal inspectors tried to confiscate his crates of fruit and his electronic scale, and he resisted. And a policewoman slapped him in front of the crowd, and it got to be really bothered him. It hurt his pride. And he went to the government building, poured paint thinner all over his body, and he set himself on fire. So in these tumultuous types of environments we still want to be able to find ways to be able to look for success, provide value in moving our projects and programs forward. So how can we do that? Well, first of all, we have to ask some key questions. As business analysts, we are change agents by default. So what could you do? Well, first of all, ask, what are your three biggest challenges? So I put this in quotes because I want you to type into your chat box there, what are your three biggest challenges in your organizations as a business analyst? What are your three biggest challenges in projects? And type that into your chat box. So I've given you some responses here. Inability to say no, ambiguity, communication gap, lack of time, lack of cohesive strategy, different locations, managing scope, managing stakeholder expectations. Now, by the way, these are also known as risks. And I'm going to talk about risks here, which are uncertain events that could be positive or negative depending. Okay, so people management is listed as another challenge. Now, people management could be positive or negative. It depends. Okay, let's take a look at this. So I had done a lot of research about this because I really got interested in understanding all the different kinds of responses from a global perspective, not just from our American perspective. And here's the responses that I got from various countries. So if you take a look at the United States here, and this is from another type of webinar that I did, I'm very structured, I'm very disciplined, I expect too much from others. Here's from Tunisia, making my company have healthier work ethic in a volatile type of world, part of the world. How could we be able to do that? Share my knowledge with colleagues. Australia, scope change, resource management, change requests. Sri Lanka, juggling multiple tasks on time. This one is my favorite over here. From France, suppressing the urge to react violently to blatant idiots. Okay, I love that one. Okay, so let's ask now, what would you like to be different? What would you like to be different? So type in your answer in the chat box there. This is something you could ask your stakeholders as well. I understand you have some challenges. What would you like to be different? So what do you think? Type in your answers to in your chat box. So here's some answers coming in. Clear priorities, have patience, manage scope, complete communication feedback, sender to receiver and back, there you go, so the communication loop, better project communication, having BAs involved during the initiation phase, more understanding, better SMEs, better listening skills, less people. Do you notice, you're starting to see something here? It's not about the tools and techniques we're talking about. There's a lot of things having to do with communication, listening skills, people skills. Okay, so I asked this question too of a global community, and here's some of the answers that I got back. Okay, I would like to be more relaxed and flexible, came from the United States. Here's the interesting one from Tunisia, again in a volatile country that had dictatorship for decades. Someone said, I want to be a leader. Here's another one, to be more useful to others and to be more organized and more wise. All right, so here we've looked at our challenges and we've looked at our what we would like to be different. Okay, so these are opportunities on the opportunity side. Now, let's carve into here, what is my definition of success? How do you define success? So type this into your chat box. How do you define success? So here's some answers. Being able to do what we want to do with happiness, the successful implementation of my project, satisfied customers, challenge which is successfully met, I learn a lot, meeting the needs of the customer in a reasonable time frame and cost, satisfied employees, building a product which is used, yeah, I like that, implementation on time and on budget. So in business analysis, typically what we want to do is define success ahead of time. What does success look like? And that goes into our business case. Financial success, as an example, is getting your return on investment in the shortest period of time. Now, with the push to get agile, okay, we still need to have a definition of what does it mean to be successful. So we could create a vision and a vision roadmap to understand what is the vision of our agile type of projects. Why are we building it? And to understand what success looks like. So we have our projects. We have various different methodologies, whether it's a waterfall, predictive, plan-driven approach, or agile, adaptive, change approach. But we still have people involved. People, success talking with people, okay, listening to them, providing stakeholder value is really important. So that's why this definition of success has changed over the course of time. It used to be, once upon a time, in project management land, on time, project success was on time, on budget, and on target. But the chaos group from the Standish, the chaos report from the Standish group has redefined project success. They said that's not good enough, because when they had tracked projects over the course of the years 2011 to 2015, they saw that the success rate of projects wasn't really increasing. And they couldn't figure out why. And why were projects not, even though if we built them on time, on budget, and on target, customers were not happy. They weren't feeling like the projects were successful. So they said, we've got to be able to think about this differently. We've got to measure success differently. So we want to be able to determine that success is not just on time, not just on budget, but really critically, we want to be able to understand what's going on here and what does success look like, what does fail look like, and what does challenge look like. So I don't know about you, but if I'm looking at this chart here and I see in 2012 only 39% of all projects are delivered on time and on budget with required features and functions, that's not a very high success rate. Not very high at all. And in project management world, project management's been around since 1969. It's been around for a long time. So why is this success rate not increasing dramatically if we've got all these processes in place? Because here's the deal. We've got challenge projects. Look, challenge projects in 2012, 43%. What does that mean? That's not on time, not on budget, and not delivered with features and functions. And failed means, hey, it didn't get out the door at all, okay? And so we want to be able to say, what can we do to increase the success, increase the likelihood of success in order to be able to improve the numbers here. So the Chaos Chronicles said, okay, let's take a look at this. Let's modernize this on time, on budget, on scope kind of concept and consider a different definition. We're going to talk more about not only on time and on budget. Those are great because they allow us to have constraints. And most of our organizations, time is essence, right? We have to get it done on time. But we've got to look at it with satisfactory results. What does that mean? Our stakeholders are happy. They feel like this is going to provide value. So when the Chaos Chronicles In 2015, the Chaos Report redefined this project success being on time and on budget with satisfactory result. The actual success rate of projects actually decreased because they found out, guess what? People are not feeling like the results of the projects are successful. So we want to be able to take a closer look at this, and this is why the Business Analysis Body of Knowledge Guide, version 3.0, if you've taken a look at that, has now really focused on the concept of value. How do we provide more value to the stakeholders, to the organizations, to the projects, and thereby increasing return on investment, increasing innovation, improving stakeholder satisfaction, decreasing project overhead, and reducing management frustration. So no matter what definition you choose for success, if you have the traditional view of success, on time, on budget, within scope, or you have a more modern version of success or something else, we want to be able to understand what version is our organization measuring us on. Because if you build it, will your stakeholders buy it? If you build it and they don't buy it, we can't call that successful. So providing value is the new definition of success. We want to be able to do it whether it's in a waterfall methodology. This is the plan, creates the time and the cost estimates. So scope is frozen, okay, frozen for satisfactory results, and time and cost become more flexible. Or we're pushing more toward the agile. The vision creates the features and the estimates. So in other words, scope is flexible, but time and cost are more rigid. Okay, so we have so many sprints that we've designed ahead of time. Either way, whether we look at it from one methodology or the other, we still have to be able to decide what does success look like. Now, there's been a lot of research related to this, not only from a project perspective, but also here, the Project Management Institute actually did a lot of research on this, and they found out that project managers across all project types, all types of industries, these are the types of dimensions that are highly correlated to successful projects. And we've got soft skills of motivation, conscientiousness, sensitivity, influence, self-awareness, emotional resilience, managing resources, and communication. Nowhere in here is saying have a good work breakdown structure or a good requirements document. It's not saying that. It's the people side of things, because there's a huge cost, to not having successful projects. 71% of failed software projects are traced back to poor requirements. Why do we have defective requirements? Because we as business analysts are not willing to ask the tough questions, to be able to push back to the organizations, where someone here earlier said being able to say no, or how about this how about this particular opportunity rather than this one? Having trade-offs, negotiating with the stakeholders. The more that you are an order taker and not an internal consultant, the more likelihood is that you're going to have poor requirements. Also, defects cost money, rework. Now, I don't know about you, I just hate rework. I want to get it done right the first time. Rework costs a lot of money. So waste of money, waste of resources is being spent on fixing software requirement errors. We want to prevent problems before they happen. And if we use the 6 steps that I'm going to show you here, you can prevent up to 90% of the problems you have on your projects. So 6 steps to plan and manage requirement problems before before they happen. And this is an abbreviated version, okay? We can be able to say we want to know the how, the identify, we want to analyze and prioritize, we want to know what to do and what to manage. Now, here's the deal. A lot of times people say, oh, I can identify problems before they happen, and that's it. They fill out some kind of form, they fill out some kind of information, okay, and that's all they do. And that's a good start, but it's not near enough. Because if you don't identify what to do about the potential problem before it happens, you pretty much wasted your time. You've got to do both, not only to identify what could happen before it happens, but you also have to identify what are you going to do about it if it happens ahead of time. Two most critical components of this. Even if you skip the 1 and skip 3 and 4 and you skip 6 and you just do step 2 and 5, you're way better than most organizations are doing today. So this is here called risk analysis and management. Now, risk analysis is a technique in the VAVOC guide, no question about it, okay? But it doesn't tell how a business analyst should do this risk analysis thing. It says, here's a technique, go figure it out, guys. You figure it out. So we've got to be able to understand, how does this work in business analysis? Well, first of all, we have to be able to identify the areas of uncertainty. What's uncertain? Well, we've talked about projects are uncertain, people, cultures. There's a lot of uncertainty that shows up in our types of organizations and our projects. But we don't want to just focus on the negative things. We also want to be able to look at the opportunity side. Okay, what are the positive things? Where's the innovation going to be coming from? So we want to be able to create the strong risk-aware culture. We want to increase revenue, the return on investment, increase innovation, improve customer satisfaction, reduce project overhead, and reduce management frustration. And these are organizations that are trying to be able to have these risk-aware cultures are really moving forward faster than their competitors. So let's talk about some foundations here that we can focus on. Now, oftentimes when I teach classes, I teach about the different kinds of life cycles that projects go through. Okay, so on the project side of things, we could have project life cycles, we could have product life cycles, or from cradle to grave. So think of it this way. How many times have you exchanged a cell phone? Cell phones these days are not designed to last forever. They're designed, the battery in a cell phone is actually designed to last about 2 years. 2 years worth of charges. And then the battery dies, and it's basically they want you to be able to upgrade to a new cell phone. Now, your cell phone may last 3 or 4 years, okay, but there are people who want to be able to have the latest, greatest stuff. That's your product life cycle. And as a business analyst, we have to understand what is the product life cycle and how does the requirements life cycle fit into the product life cycle. Because we've got to be able to understand what is the status of our requirements. Are they proposed? Are they rejected? They approved? Canceled? They're in progress? They're deferred? They're completed? Or they're implemented? Okay? And this is all directly from business analysis. And this picture is actually from the Business Analysis for Practitioners, a practice guide. Okay, this is one that was produced from the Project Management Institute. Project Management Institute's getting involved with business analysis too. Okay, and so we want to understand the flow and understand the various life cycles and how does that affect our projects. We don't want to have our head in the sand and not just focused on requirements itself. So the very first step here is to be able to do analysis. Now, as business analysts, we should be pretty good at that, but what are we going to focus on in order to prevent problems before they happen? Well, the very first thing we have to focus on is the why, behind the what. Why are we doing what we're doing? So that means every single project should have a business need and a business case defined. And I don't care which methodology you are using. If you don't know the why behind the what, you're already behind the game. I was working with an insurance company down in Missouri. They also have a branch in Albany, New York, and they had just finished their first Agile project. They had 16 sprints. They were utilizing an external consulting company. And I had people in my class that basically had survivor t-shirts on. We survived our first Agile project, and it was not very fun. Okay, and I did lessons learned with them, or retrospectives. I did and I said, what happened? What happened to this? And they go, we didn't really know what we were doing. Why were we doing what we were doing? We were just following what this consultant told us to do. And I hear that over and over and over again, is people relying on these external resources because they think they know your company better than you do. You are the expert at your organization. You have to figure out the why behind the what. And some people typed in challenges having to do with communication. So we've got to have a communication plan. We've got to understand how are we going to communicate this? What are the challenges having to do with communication? If you've had challenges before, don't you think they're going to show up again? We also have to be able to help our stakeholders make better decisions. And we have to analyze, how do our stakeholders make different decisions? Some people are very analytical people. Some people make quick decisions. Some take days or weeks to be able to make decisions. Some cultures have to make a decision as a group effort. Okay, so we have to understand that in our analysis phase. Also, we need to know change management. Now, change management happens very differently, whether it's a waterfall predictive approach, you have a formal change management process. If it's an adaptive approach, change happens when we can put our user stories into our backlog and reprioritize our user stories. But we have to understand, why do you want this change? How does that tie back to the business need? Just adding in user stories as they come along isn't valuable enough for the organization if we're working on the wrong things. Cultural assessment is important here, understanding your culture and how to make decisions, especially if you have multiple different types of branches in your organization, helping to understand that. There is a cultural assessment instrument that I've utilized in organizations, and you can have cultures and subcultures and sub-subcultures within one building, and that can also get in the way of problems on your projects. So plan-driven versus change-driven methodology. Now, a lot of organizations are pushing towards Agile. They're firing their business analysts because they go, oh, we don't need those business analysts anymore. To me, I'm thinking this is going to be a pendulum swinging back and forth. They're going to fire all these business analysts. They're not going to get good requirements and detailed requirements, and they're going to go, oh, I think we need to hire some business analyst consultants to come in here. Okay, this pendulum swings back and forth. Okay, and we still need to have some methodology, but the methodology has to be individually for each project understood. Why are we doing this methodology? One size does not fit all. Requirements traceability is a big deal because both in how do we manage and communicate requirements from the business analyst to the project manager to the development team and back from the development team and testing all the way back to the why. Bi-directional requirements is essential in preventing problems before they happen. Also, we've been talking about those stakeholders, those pesky stakeholders. We want to understand their attitude. Do they care about requirements? One business analyst told me the executives in her company, they don't want to make time for eliciting requirements. She says, oh, but when we have the prototype built, they come in and they swoop and poop all over our prototype. Yeah, because their attitude was, I'll come in later. I'm not going to spend the time ahead of time. We have to also understand their risk tolerance. Are they risk averse, or are they risk seeking, or are they risk neutral? So this also has to do with decisions. How do decisions get made in organizations? And engagement and influence and all the people side of things. So stakeholder management is huge in preventing problems before they happen. So ideally, if you are trying to prevent as many problems as they can happen before time, you want to be able to have a role called a risk owner. Someone who's constantly looking for how can we prevent problems before they happen. If you have any kinds of status meetings and you're focusing on percent complete, that's old school. You want to be able to say, what are we doing to prevent problems in the future? That should be the number one thing on your agenda. So I've been talking a lot about this how, because this sets the stage for us being successful moving forward. Because here's an example of a one-page business case. We want to know, how does this initiative support the strategic plan? I had one business analyst go, oh, we're supposed to ask that? We're supposed to know about the strategic plan? Yes. What's the vision, the mission, and the values of your organization? What's the key initiatives that your organization is working on for 2016? For a publicly traded organization, all that stuff should be on the website for the shareholders. Now, if it's a privately held organization, maybe it's a little harder to find, but most organizations are really saying, here's what we are looking to do in 2016, 17. You should be listening, because everything you should be doing should be tied to those organizational goals. The culture of organizations is also critical for being able to understand the organization. This is an example of an output that I created doing an organizational cultural assessment instrument, an OCAI. You can use this too. It's free. This is by Cameron and Quinn. And there are 4 major types of organizational cultures. You have a hierarchy culture, clan culture, adhocracy culture, and a market culture. Now take a look at these 2 people. These were actual results that I did in an organization. Now these, both the technical manager and the technical director, were in the same department. What this asks here is the solid line, the solid purple line there, is asking, what is your assessment of the current culture of the organization? Both of them are looking at the current organization differently, totally differently. They're in the same department. And then the dotted line here shows what would they like to be different. Okay, it's just like the questions that I asked you. What would you like to be different? And guess what? They're different too. So these technical manager and the technical director are on totally different pages. How are you going to manage, how are you going to work in a culture when people in your same department are on different pages as to what they think the direction of the organization is? And I'll tell you the reason why this happened. I was working in a call center company, and the reason it is because we didn't have a clear head of the organization. The CEO of the company, he was basically a figurehead. He was just there, you know, kind of cashing his check. And then, so who was running the company was actually the human resource director, and it was the finance director. And oh, by the way, they were having some relationship thing going on between them, and so they were, you know, had their own agenda. So pretty much everybody was on their own. We didn't know which way the ship was going. Where are we supposed to be going? What's the direction of the organization? And you could see it very clearly by just this one picture. I'm going to tell you that after I did this organizational cultural assessment instrument, this company lost their number one client, Medicare, Medicaid. 50% of their revenue virtually disappeared, and my job too went along with it, because they did not have a clear direction of what's going on. I could have predicted that by looking at this one page, this one picture. So when we're talking about how to prevent problems before they happen, we've got to be able to be clear about what are the risks and make sure that we have a clear understanding of how to define them. So poor communication is not a risk. It is not a risk. So here's the second tidbit that I'm going to give for you. When you are defining risks in doing your risk analysis technique according to the BABAC guide, you want to be able to clearly have a well-formed risk. Here is the well-formed risk. Due to poor elicitation of customer requirements, that's your cause. This is the risk itself. The installation of ABC system will have significant issues. That's your uncertain event. The impact which could lead to or would lead to is 4 weeks of rework. How do you know you have a well-formed risk? Is because you can define the impact in time and money. This is the value that fixing or preventing this risk is providing to your organization. In your organization, think about it. How much would it cost your organization for 4 weeks of rework? 4 weeks of rework. If 4 weeks is a sprint to you, that means the entire sprint is thrown out. 4 weeks is, depending on how many people are on your projects, could be thousands if not millions of dollars. And you would want to prevent this problem before they happened. And you would know what to do about it because you know that the root cause is poor elicitation of customer requirements. So organizations don't want to think they have risks. They don't want to be able to think about it. They will like, no, 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 or here, do that risk thing, and they check the box, no, 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 okay. Or that's a project management thing, UBAs, you don't have to worry about that. You know, you just go collect your requirements. No, no, no. There are many, many risks to an organization, and typically I do a brainstorming session. I ask questions like, what are we going to do? What are your challenges? What do we want to prevent problems before they happen? What would you like to do differently? And we'll just brainstorm some of these on some sticky notes. So I just collect a lot of sticky notes, and I collect more, and I collect more, and I collect more, and I collect more, and then you start to, after a while, you go, wow, we got a lot of things we got to think about here. Okay, we've got to be able to be clear about what can we do to prevent these problems, or if there are opportunities, what can we do to make them happen? So that comes in our next step here. That's about prioritizing requirements, and this is having to do with analysis and prioritization of risks. So we want to be able to analyze and prioritize our risks. Now we can do this 2 ways. If we have little time, we could do risk qualification. Okay, so we could be able to assign probability impact subjectively, high, medium, or low, scale 1 to 3. Or if you have more detailed information in your organizations, you can do quantitative risk analysis, assign probability and impact numerically. And so here's an example of a probability scale. Now, high, medium, low is not my favorite, okay, because first of all, ideally you want to have an even numbered scale. An even number scale forces people to make decisions. Okay, I prefer numbers over high, medium, low. Also, what if everything is a high? You got high, 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 high probability, high impact. Then what do you do with that, right? It's pretty much a waste. So my preferred scale really is 1 to 10. And now I have to define what does 1 mean. I have to define what a 10 means, and I have to define in between, but it gives people some more clarity around probability. Okay, and impact. Impact is always time and money and being on target in scope. Okay, so how does this affect our project constraints? Now, project constraint could also be quality. It also could be customer satisfaction. You have to define what does this look like. But bottom line, the most important thing is how does this affect the financial side of things. So you can be able to have a impact scale as well. You could be able to say scale 1 to 5, able to have 1 to 8, okay, or 1 to 10, but you multiply the probability times the impact to come up with the risk score, okay, whatever the risk score is. Now here in this one here, this is pretty, this is the highest, this is 24, okay, that because the probability was 3 and the impact was 8. Now 8 is the highest impact on this particular scale. So you'd have to be able to say, okay, what are we going to do about this? Well, I have a fast, easy way to be able to prioritize these risks is by using something like this. I put Post-it notes on here and I say, okay, low, high probability goes up here, and high impact goes up here. So this particular risk as a number 1 is the highest probability and the highest impact. I want to have a plan how to prevent the number 1 highest risk scored risk, because if I don't, the probability of that happening is 80%. That means it's almost a fact. It's pretty much a fact. We've got to be able to have a plan for how we're going to prevent this problem from happening. Now we could also create a threshold, and we could say, well, anything that's kind of below the line, we're just going to keep a watch on it. Now, you could also do this with user stories. The key to doing this analysis step here is to be able to make this quick and easy. So Michael Lant, who's the founder of ProjectYap.com, describes how to quickly analyze and prioritize user stories by using one of the most frequent finite resources, time, okay? Or he calls it urgency. So urgency here is on the bottom here, and we're going to multiply this by business value. Now, first, we also have to be able to clarify what is a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 related to business value. Well, 1 here is described as little to no competitive advantage, and a 5 is described here as critical to the business, the success of business. Okay, and then we could also describe 2 and a 3 and a 4. Now, urgency we defined here as not time constrained for a 1, and a 5 is extremely time constrained. And then we would also define a 2 and a 3 and a 4. Okay, so if as an example, if I was going to look at urgency, I could say a 4 is highly time constrained. As a 3, I could say it's moderately time constrained, and a 2, it's minimally time constrained. Okay, so we could be able to then put these kinds of scores, okay, and these kind of scores can then also help us if we multiply our business value times our urgency. The product of these two numbers, you can be able to then to understand what's the priority of them. 25 means extremely high priority, critical, must be done immediately, requires executive approval. Okay, and by having the system, you have this nice way of ranking the importance of your user stories in a nice colorful chart. So it may appear to be a lot of work, but with little value, but in practice this is really quite simple exercise. It gets you to the decision point pretty quickly. So the fact is the system makes it predictable, and in 10 minutes it takes to learn and implement will be recouped in your first sprint planning session. So the way to approach this is to be able to leave a space in the upper right-hand corner of your story cards. And in that corner, you write down 3 numbers representing urgency, business value, and priority, always in that order. So then when you prioritize a story, you do a quick assessment of the urgency and business value, and then you simply multiply the two numbers together. And then using the highlighter, you can color code the priority number according to this chart. That's it. It takes like 10 to 20 seconds to be able to do this for your user stories. So this is important as business analysts, is to find ways to be able to provide more value to the things we are doing already. So our step 5 here, risk response strategies for threats. This is what I told you, is that we've got to be able to not only identify, but we also have to be able to identify what to do about the threats. The threats here is, it could be done at any point in time, but usually it's done initiating and planning. It's to avoid, mitigate, and transfer risks. Workarounds are done in executing after issues happen. Where do business analysts provide the most value is to prevent problems before they happen. Now again, we don't want to just focus on threats here. We want to be able to focus on opportunities. We want to look for positive impacts to time and to money. We want to be able to share opportunities. So in other words, if you have a contract with a vendor, what about sharing the ownership of the risk? Okay, there are different types of contracts, and contracts is actually a risk mitigation tool. You can also share who's going to own the intellectual property that's produced as a result of the project you're working on. Sharing resources often happens as well. Enhancing or looking for root cause of why is something happening. Let's not just deal with the symptom. And enhancing triggers. So in other words, how are we going to know that we have incomplete requirements before it happens? What could we look for to know that's happening before we find it out when we're doing testing? And acceptance. If it happens, it happens. But we could be proactive in this and create contingency reserves for time and money. So if these types of risks happen, we have already some time and resources and money set aside to be able to deal with it, rather than putting out, dealing with the fires and dealing with issues. Another critical part of this, and this is something that I find is not happening near enough in organization, is how do you validate requirements? How do you validate requirements? And it's by measuring performance. Measuring performance is utilizing key performance indicators. So here's an example. This is actually an example of a spreadsheet that I created for a manufacturing company of snowplows and lawnmowers in the St. Paul area, St. Paul, Minnesota area. And what the problem was that every single one of their projects were late. All of them, 100% of the projects were late. And the director of the PMO says, I don't know, what can we do to prevent this from happening? So I went there, and one of the key parts of this is the only thing they were measuring was time. She says, well, we need to measure other things? Of course you have to measure other things. So number of risks on a risk register, number of product defects, deviations in your budget, be able to understand the percentage of projects on budget, any KPIs, the number of projects on time, which was 0 at that point, number of activities on the critical path, number of issues on your issue log. So there are a number of different things that you can be able to measure before they happen. Now earlier I also said we've got to look at the side of things. It's not just about the projects and the requirements, but we've got to look at people. Now every single person that you have on your project, it would be ideal if they all worked exactly the same, right? You could be able to, organizations sometimes think they could swap out, Joe for Pete or Susie for, someone else. Okay, but that's not true in the real world. in the real world, there is a productivity factor, right? One guy can work twice as fast as the other guy, okay? And it could be having to do with their experience, their skills, okay? And we have to take that into account as we are defining these projects, is to understand what is the productivity percentage that we can be able to predict based on past experience of our individual contributors to the success of the project. And we could track this over time, be able to have a better idea of what we can do to estimate time or our projects, or choose the right resources for our projects depending on what the constraints are related to that. Another component of this is defining assumptions and constraints. 90% of the assumptions we make are wrong. We assume something to be true and it's not. And we never asked about it. We just assumed it was true. Okay? I had one business analyst who said to me, I'm supposed to see contracts? I'm allowed to see contracts for this project? I said, has anybody ever told you you can't? She goes, no. But I just assumed I couldn't. Now, contracts is a risk mitigation tool, and you should have the ability to not only have input to contracts, but also have the ability to be able to have a clear understanding of what the contracts are saying. They're not boilerplate. Everything, all the requirements that you've been eliciting all during the course of the project should be baked into a contract. Terms and conditions are meant to be updated. I don't know about you, but I've been a victim of bad contracts. You look at the contract and go, who wrote this thing? What were you thinking when you came up with this kind of concept? I've also seen where we've done business with bad suppliers, bad vendors. Who picked that vendor? Based on which criteria? So we want to be able to have this in place in order to create appropriate, successful solutions. So here's my 5 top tips for providing more value and preventing problems before they happen so that people will buy, will want to buy, will be clamoring to buy whatever product, service, or result that you are providing. First and foremost, find the why before the what. You've got to be able to have a business case, a vision document, whatever your company calls it, before every single solution. There is no use for not doing this. When I teach exam preparation classes, I've just finished teaching the PMI PBA exam preparation class. And I ask my students, all 12 of them in my class, create a business case that's going to tell me why are you going to take this exam. I want to know the details, the financial justification. I want to understand the details because guess what? If you don't do this now, life will get in the way. I know this will be true. Okay? So understand the why before the what. Look for more opportunities than threats. You as a business analyst will be way more valuable to your organization if you're focusing on enhancing, providing more value, exploiting opportunities than just putting out fires. Keep it simple. I can't tell you how many times I've seen organizations really push business analysts to be able to fill out documentation, and I asked the business analyst, why are you filling this out? And they go, I don't know, because that's what I was told to do. I said, who's going to receive this information? They go, this old lady sitting in the office over here. And I said, what is she going to do with it? And they go, I don't know. That's just what we were told to do. Okay? So I'm a paperholic. I use Post-it notes and I use paper because the discussion is way more valuable with my stakeholders. than trying to be able to insert it into some Excel spreadsheet or some requirements traceability matrix or some kind of software that my organization. Now, eventually it does go into software, but first what I need to do is keep it simple and use paper before I start to use my computer. Measure culture. Measure culture. You can use very simple instruments like the OCAI. If you Google OCAI, Organizational Cultural Assessment Instrument, it's a free tool. It's really easy to be able to utilize. You'll get some amazing results out of this kind of thing, especially if you're in an organization, a volatile organization, or an organization that's going through a reorg, or you've got some mergers and acquisition things going on in your organization. When people are scared about their job, this is the time to measure culture. Do more than identify. Create risk responses to manage risks proactively. We want to proactively prevent problems before they happen. So that's what I got for you today. I have time here for questions. So what questions can I answer for you today? What questions can I answer for you today? How to identify risk? Great questions. So you can go back to the original questions that I asked you. What are your challenges? That's always the first thing I ask. What do you want to be better? Okay, you can ask your stakeholders this. Okay, what do you want? What do you want to be different? Those three questions that I asked you earlier in this presentation are key ways that you could start to identify risk. What could you do to prevent problems before it happen? What happened on our last project that you don't want to have happen again? What are your concerns about this project? What does success look like for you? Those are the kinds of, and they're very high-level questions, but as you start to be able to ask more and more details about the questions, you can be able to identify the details. Now, I also gave you the structure for writing out the risk. So when you write out the well-formed risk, due to poor requirements, the result is the risk, and what's the impact? Now, you could have many risks attached to the same root cause. Due to poor requirements, here's a risk. Due to poor requirements, here's a risk. You could look at your past projects and know what could happen moving forward. If lack of communication happened every single time you've been on projects before, guess what? Do you think it's going to happen again? Yes. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? So what are some good KPIs for requirements? Key performance indicators. Okay, so requirements. We want to be able, if we're going to look at improving our requirements, some key performance indicators. First of all, you go to your organization and you want to be able to understand what are they measuring. So if your organization is measuring, say, customer satisfaction, then you want to be able to tie all of your KPIs related to customer satisfaction. So which one of our requirements is tied to customer satisfaction? Are we even measuring customer satisfaction? I can't tell you how many times business analysts told me, oh, I'm not allowed to talk to the customer, the end user. And I said, so did someone specifically say to you you're not allowed to talk to them? And they said, well, no, but that's what I thought they told me to do. So you want to be able to first take a look at your key performance indicators of your organization. That's the why behind the what. What is your company measuring? That's the first thing. Was your company measuring performance of teams? A healthcare company, they measure everything having to do with IIBA. That's earnings before interest and taxes. Everything that they measure in their organization is tied one way or another to their EBITDA, okay, a financial metric. So if any of your requirements are linked to that, so for instance, time, how much time does it take for you to create models? Okay, are you estimating your time accurately? What is your variance between your estimates for producing models or use cases or user stories versus your actuals? If time is the most critical component in your organization, how are you measuring time? How are you improving time? Okay, I also find that also, how can you be more efficient and effective in the work that you do? Lean Six Sigma is a way to reduce waste in organizations. You can measure waste. You can be able to measure rework, okay? Measuring issues on issue logs. If you are continuously improving, you should have less issues on your issue logs, because you have more risks on your risk register. You're preventing problems before they happen. So some other questions here. How can you prevent being caught between the crossfire between business and technology? All right, so one of the skill sets that you should have as a business analyst is to be that liaison among stakeholders, and negotiation is a critical component of that. So if you have some crossfire going between business and technology, I suggest that you learn about some key components of how to do negotiation. And the first part of negotiation is understanding what's the value the business wants, and what's the value that the success and the value that technology wants. If there are two different objectives having to do with the business and the technology, you have to get them both on the same page. You can't move forward until you clarify the objectives of business and the objectives of technology, and they're on the same page. Also, we want to be able to say, how can we get you to support the initiative? Maybe you don't support all the details, but we want to get to a consensus. That's ideal. So a good negotiator, good negotiation skills is essential if you're trying to be able to take care of crossfire. Also, crossfire has to do with lack of understanding of roles and responsibilities. Conflict is a symptom of misunderstanding of roles and responsibilities. So having a RACI matrix stands for responsible, accountable, consult, and informed, can help you to be able to deal with lack of ambiguity having to do with roles and responsibilities. Next question here is how to handle issues with two newly merged, highly similar companies that have different views of requirements, visions for the end state. Whoa, that's a pretty meaty one here. Okay, so merging organizations, merging cultures, okay? What do we need to do? We have to be able to understand, and this starts at the leadership level. So if you're in an organization like this, you've got to be best buddies with the people at the top, okay? Because it's good. The top, stuff rolls downhill, right? You've got to be able to work with the key management in order to be able to understand what their objectives are. If you're working from the bottom up, you're not going to be very successful, because you're going to get the end results of everything that's happening at the top. Because you've got to be able to understand what is their strategy, what is their vision for not only this year but moving forward, and how what you are doing is linking back to that strategy. I know that's a big tough thing, but when we're dealing with culture of two merging organizations, cultural change is a long-term project. That's 3 years, 5 years. It's not going to happen within a year. This takes time. It takes multiple projects in order to do that, and many, many conversations and many discussions with the stakeholders. Other questions for how to be able to prevent problems before they happen? Am I willing to share my presentation? Yes, I will put it in a PDF format so that you can be able to review it. And please tell me if there's any other suggestions that you have that helped you to prevent problems before they happen? I like to be able to share these stories. Oh, Ricky, I love this question. How do you define leadership? My definition of leadership is actually having to do with courageous leadership. Courageous leadership is something that actually Ronald Reagan, one of the former presidents of the United States, actually, when he wanted to get stuff done, he first talked to the heart before he talked to the head. Heart-centered, courageous leaders are those that are willing to deal with problems, push through the fear, ask the tough questions, and then do it anyway. Ask questions is the most critical key tool that a business analyst could have. Do not be afraid to be able to ask questions. Question here, organizational readiness cultural assessment. Does it need to be performed for every stakeholder? What if too many stakeholders? You could do for the key. You noticed in my slide deck here, I had just a technical director and the technical manager. That tells you a lot right there. You don't have to even do it for the rest of the department. And I actually did it for the rest of the department, and it was all over the board. I actually predicted just by looking at this one screenshot that one of the persons was going to leave the company because she was completely opposite in what she perceived the culture to be and what she wanted to be the culture to be. And a month later, she submitted her resignation. So depending on the volatility of your organization, you might want to do it with all your stakeholders. How to get a decision made when there is more than one stakeholder and they don't agree on certain things. In the Business Analysis Body of Knowledge Guide, and actually there's a website you can go to called mindtools.com, mindtools.com. If there's a whole toolkit or a whole toolbox in there that says decision analysis, and there are 49 decision analysis tools in that toolbox. And there are a number of different ways you can help people make decisions, like pair compare or a weighted comparison matrix. When you're helping people make decisions, you don't want to have them make decisions between 10 different things. Just have them do between 2. Okay, and there are ways to do this having to do with multiple requirements. You could be able to do it stakeholder by stakeholder, groups of stakeholders. So go to mindtools.com, put in decision analysis, and it'll come up with 49 different ways to do what you're asking. How do you prevent or reduce stakeholders from designing solutions? Okay, so you may not prevent them from doing it, but to reduce them. Business analysis, technically, according to the BABA guide, stops short of design. Now, if you're going to do prototyping, you know people are going to go down the design path, right? You know they are, okay? So you might have, say, maybe you start with a lo-fi prototype, right? Lo-fi meaning we're just focused on the what, not the how, okay? What do you want to do, not how should it, how to do it. So again, push back to the stakeholders. When they're telling you what the design should look like, push back to them and say, thank you very much. We'll capture that here in your document, okay, a separate document. But right now I'm really focused on when you are looking at this, what do you want to accomplish? What is the output of this? What do you want it to do? Okay, go back to the questions and ask, what is the output? And focus them on the what, the features and the functions versus on the how. Other questions here? Okay, Betsy, I don't see any more questions.
Okay, Dale, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. We enjoyed your presentation very much, and you really did a great job thinking on your feet to answer all our questions. So thank you so much, Dale, and I want to wish you the very best of luck with this presentation in Barcelona next month.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, good. We'd like to hear from you again after your presentation.
I will. I will. I'll give you all kinds of good information.
Okay, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and we'll send out a survey, and we'd love to hear your feedback.
Yes, thank you so much. Give me your feedback. Any pro or con, it's all good.
Okay, thank you everyone. Good night.